Also making sure I do everything today, right now, and multitask as much as I can. So you're going to be with me as I meal prep and I'm cooking, so I may step away, but I am here. And the topic today, everybody, is basically running a lean operation, right? And not being lost in the sauce and protecting the impact of your company or organization in quarter 4 so you can start 2026 with a bang. And oh, let me turn off the zucchini so it doesn't overcook. All right. So that's done. So nonprofits and social enterprises. So I'm gonna get right to it, and then again, I'm gonna be going back and forth because I have like multiple dishes cooking at once. So nonprofits and social enterprises right now are feeling the squeeze this particular quarter. And in this live, I'm gonna break down how to run a lean operation, protect your impact, and finish the year strong. So if you are not familiar with my page or you're not familiar with the work I do, I encourage you to drop the word group because I share resources and information inside the Growth Minded Nonprofit Circle, which is a free Facebook group, right? And that is available to you. So I welcome you to drop the word group and I will send you the link to join that. So, oh, about this particular thing, I want to be You already know I'm blunt and I speak my mind. I say what I gotta say, right? And that is the way it is. And again, if you're joining live, hashtag live, like this post. The more you engage, the more it works for this social media thing. So you can't keep saying your organization just needs more funding or you need to bring in more revenue for your company. Because if you can't manage what you already have, then more money is not going to fix it. It'll expose the issues that you're experiencing. So you have to like really figure out how to manage what you have before looking for more. And that's how operations comes into play and why it's very important for you to fix that because that becomes an operational problem and not a funding problem per se. So what I mean by that is that in 2024, more than a third of nonprofits 36% to be exact, ended the year with an operating deficit. Okay. So that's the highest number in more than a decade, right? So, in the majority of these organizations, they didn't just go um, under because their missions weren't relevant to their programs or their programs weren't effective, right? They were simply trying to sustain growth without having the infrastructure for it. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes organizations have good programs, right? Their mission is amazing, but their operation does not, I have something in my hair, does not help them implement these programs in a way that's sustainable. Where, let's say, they have ambitious goals to help XYZ number of people, but their capacity to do that is not there. They don't have the training, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the human capacity to do the work. So, what's happening is that they are slowly collapsing within themselves because they didn't set up the infrastructure or operation to ensure that they're able to do the work in the way that it needs to be done. Because when you are implementing programs and services, you also have to have an implementation plan and audit your capacity and make sure that your operation aligns with what you're trying to do. Because if your program is trying to deliver to XYZ number of people, let's say 100 people, and you only have a team of one, you need to see how to make that team of one work in a way or do stuff in a way that's more efficient and saves them time to be able to do what they need to do. So that's what I mean by you need to audit the capacity and the gaps that you have and do the work according to the capacity that you have, not what you wish you had. Because the issue that becomes apparent is when organizations are trying to do work that they want to do with what they do not have yet. And that causes a level of collapse within the organizations that, it's unfortunate, right? So that's what I want you to think about. And that's the pressure that we're talking about right now, right? It's quarter four, salaries are higher. Living expenses are higher. Trust me, I know grants are delayed, and that's across the board. A lot of people are having delays in grants, right? A lot of organizations, revenue people are like very scarce with how they spend money. So if you're a company, like you have to get creative on how you market and things like that to ensure that your revenue is still being generated, right? The same money has to stretch further. That's essentially what's happening right now. So that's what I want you to think about. And most people don't want to admit that cutting your way out of the problem doesn't work. You cannot, and I learned this from my former coach, you cannot out budget your way out of the current inflation that we're living in because you're going to budget just to get in a place where you have to continue budgeting and you can never do the things that you want to do. That's like in a personal life. But in your professional life, organizational, you cannot just cut away the problem. Because if you have a funding issue or if you have a capacity issue, you can't just cut it off. You have to think about how to make the operation fit what you have without overexerting the organization or the team members that you have. What you actually need to do is look at where your time, your systems, and your people are leaking capacity, right? That's what running lean actually means. And I've met like wonderful organizations that have a team of three doing the work of an organization with a staff of 30. And that's because they had their ducks in a row. They knew what everybody was responsible for. This is what each person is doing. This is each person's responsibility. They had onboarding processes and trainings for interns or volunteers that wanted to support, and they weren't even a nonprofit. Okay. So that goes to show you, you really can run a lean team if your operation is down pat. Okay. So it doesn't mean doing more with less. That is not what it means. That organization was making millions of dollars and they only had a staff of three and a board. So like that goes to show you, actually four, because then at one point they brought in a fourth person. Now they have five. So you can be a lean, mean machine, but you need the operation and infrastructure to support that as you grow. So think about I want you to think about the last 2 months in your organization and ask yourself, how much time has your team spent chasing information that should have been readily available? How many times have decisions been delayed because no one was clear on who was responsible for what? Like, and the way I would say who owned what, okay? And that's what I want you to start thinking about. Like, all these things are very important for you to pinpoint, right? Because I worked with an organization that had 10 full-time staff and yet they were constantly behind on reports, right? They blamed it on not having enough people. But if you have 10 team members, you still can't be on time with reports. There's a problem. So that's where we reviewed their process, right? We found that three different staff members were actually touching the same data before it even reached the executive director. So there was a lot of redundant work happening for no reason, right? So they weren't lacking people, they were duplicating efforts. And that's what I mean when I say waste. I don't mean that the person is wasting their time and the resource of the organization. It's effort. You're wasting your effort on doing things that you shouldn't have to do because your operations does not make sense, right? Waste isn't always about spending money, right? Sometimes it's about how your team spends their time. And time is your most precious resource in your organization or company because you can't get that back. And you got to pay. You got to pay them for their time. So you have to think about that, right? So if your executive director is manually reviewing every invoice, right? Reviewing every invoice, like you have to ask yourself, like, is that how they can use their leadership skills? Because it's not leadership at this point, it's low value work. I'm not saying it's not important work, it's low value work for what this executive director needs to be doing. And that's a systems failure because the executive director has other work they could be doing, but they're spending their time on something that's not valuable to what they need to be doing, right? So when operations are weak, your smartest people are spending their time doing things that should have been automated, delegated, or in a process, so or eliminated like months ago. So that's what I mean by weak operations oftentimes. So when we talk about running lean, I want you to think about that. Okay. Now, for those who are new here, I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning, but that's all right. My name is Stacey, and I am an operations strategist. I help growth stage nonprofits and social enterprises, small businesses, social impact focus with their operations and systems so they can continue to grow. So if your organization is already bringing revenue and you're between the 500,000 and $10 million in annual revenue, I can help support your company or organization with strategic planning, operational planning, and capacity audits and different things like that to support your organization and where it's going. So that's the work that we do. And we also have our signature method called the precisions-led operations method, which starts with clarity. And this first step is defining the outcomes clearly, right? Because you cannot streamline what you haven't defined. So we look for that level of clarity in everything that's being done in the work because you have to know exactly what success looks like in your organization or company, not just for the year, but for every role, every project, every process. Okay. The second step is assigning ownership because if everyone owns it, no one does. Um, I don't know if you caught that. If everyone owns the one task, no one does. Because what happens? Everybody's hand is in the pot. Everybody thinks they have a say in what's happening, so nothing is getting done. Okay? Because each outcome needs one person who's accountable for it, right? Not to do all the work, but to make sure it gets done. It's like having someone, let's say you have a soup that needs to get done, but there's so many different things that have to be sourced. One person, let's say I, will be responsible for making sure the soup is done, but I'm gonna ask Josh to go collect the mushrooms. I'm going to ask John to go collect the meat at the store, or Josh is the produce, and John will get the meat. And then the spices will be Valerie's responsibility. Okay, so I'm the one responsible for the outcome, which is a delicious soup, but I have people responsible for different things. You need to have someone who owns the outcome to ensure that it gets done. Okay. The second step in our method, our signature method, is assigning ownership. That's why we do that, right? That's why we do that because you want to make sure that it is getting done. And the third step is visibility. Now, dashboards, workflows, progress tracking, all of these things are examples of visibility. And whatever your organization uses, I don't care if it's Monday.com, Asana, Airtable, whatever it is that you're using, you should make sure that it's easy for anyone in your organization or company to see it, to see what's on track. You need a dashboard to see what's happening. So it's not like, surprise, we did this or we didn't do that. Like people have a dashboard that makes work visible, where you don't have to wait a week to find out if Stacy got the soup ready, right? You can see on the dashboard because as soon as it's done or as it progresses, I am going to add notes or status. I'm going to update the status so you can see where I am with this task. Okay. So that's what I want you to realize. Like our method, the precision-led operations method, the clarity, visibility, and accountability or ownership, that's what we focus on because that's how you stop operating in crisis mode, right? And I have more examples, but we're gonna stop there because for some reason I can't do two things at once. I thought I was gonna meal prep and do this at the same time. It ain't working. It ain't working for me. So I'm going to try and continue meal prepping and walk away and go get the pot and put the cabbage in it or whatever's supposed to go in it because for some reason I cannot focus on this live and that. But I'm gonna learn to multitask if I can. So beyond that, another example I have for you is a social enterprise in California that is struggling to meet deliverables on workforce development contract, right? Every quarter, they're turning their reports in late. They have passionate staff, but their data is lives everywhere. Google Sheets, staff desktop, random emails. And one thing that happens is if they developed a dashboard through Airtable and standardize, or even Monday.com, and standardize how data is entered, something can shift. Now, why I say that? Because the more organized they are, the more strategic they are, and the faster the reports can be produced. Because what happens is when you have a report, there's so much information that some grants or some stakeholders ask for. You have to have an organized way of collecting that data. So when the reporting time comes, you can generate it. Now, Airtable and Monday.com, they also utilize AI agents that can summarize the data for you. So you can even tell it the criteria of what you want written. So when the data is there, it can take the input and provide something for you to add to your report if that's something you need to do. So you have to use technology and different systems to support your operation to ensure that you're not wasting time. Because what could have happened for that organization, their compliance to their contract could have improved and they wouldn't have lost that grant the next year. Okay, because their funders, I'm sure they noticed, they probably was like frustrated with them. So you need to make sure that you have systems that support the work that you do in your operations. Okay. And that will help you run lean as well. Okay. Because then you don't need multiple people to do it. You just need a good system to help support that work. And you don't need to hire new people to do that work. So I'm gonna move the computer. You gonna move with me. I'm sorry to say. I'm gonna put this over here. So yeah. So operational planning, that's why when I work with clients that hire me for a strategic plan, I know one of my clients, that's what we're working on right now. It's a strategic plan, but I also provide my clients with an operational plan. So I get in the nitty-gritty and get in their business, asking different questions when it comes to how they run the operations. Because one thing with me is that strategic plans. Yesterday, I provided data of how 70% of organizations, social enterprises, Fortune 500 companies report that their strategic plan never reached full implementation. 70%, right? And I felt like, well, not I felt, I know it's because their operations are not aligned to help them with the implementation. They don't consider the gaps that exist and the capacity deficiencies that they have to be able to put that together. Like it looks good on paper, but how you go if you don't have systems and operations to support it, how are you going to do that? It's my 2 cents on that one. Let me see. All right. So operational planning, I know that's the last thing I want to talk about before I start refocusing on this and get serious about this because I could have been done with this particular dish, and I'm tripping. Okay. So operational planning answers questions like who's going to own the outcome? What's the process to get there? And what tools do we need to make it happen efficiently? So imagine your strategic plan tells you what you need to do and what the goals are, what the vision is. But if you don't know how you're going to get there, that's the problem. That's why you need an operational plan. That's why we support our clients with an operational plan, not just a strategic plan, because I'm not in the business of people wasting money. If they don't put it into action, that's on them, but you need it to make sure that you know how to get there, right? And it's what's going to separate organizations that react from organizations that grow. And growth right now doesn't come from adding, it comes from tightening because right now things are tight. Okay, so you need to tighten your operations and make sure that you're able to grow and go in the direction that you need to go because in this economy, funders are not going to be impressed by big goals. They're going to be impressed by organizations that can show discipline, clarity, and the ability that they can sustain the work that they're doing. Okay, that can sustain results with the resources that they have, right? That can maximize the resources that they have. And that's what your systems can communicate for you when they're built right. So you need to think about that piece when you are considering where you want to go. And if your team is stretched, your projects are delayed, right? Or your reports keep slipping. And this is what I want you, this is the where I want you to pause and realign before 2026 because we're in quarter 4. Not too long ago, I was talking about 2025 coming. Now 2026 is coming. So you need to get ready. Now, and I know you need you know deep down that if you keep running your company or organization the way you are running it, something will eventually give out. I don't care if it's burnout, funding, whatever it is, something will give out. Even your credibility. Okay. That's why I created the precision strategy session. Because in the precision strategy session, it's a 90-minute session, a 90-minute call where we meet, you or your leaders, and we determine an action plan for the next 3 to 6 months of how to get to the next level, especially if you don't have the capacity in place and you need a plan of how to get ready at the basic level before you get serious on a strategic plan and operational plan, then the precision strategy session gets you ready for the next level. It's high impact working session where we analyze your operations, identify your biggest inefficiencies, and I help you map out the next 6 months, 3 to 6 months of like action of what to do. So it's not a theory. It's not another meeting that ends with ideas where no one implements. It's an action plan with steps of what to do. You can book it for $597, right? The link is going to be in my bio. And also, yeah, it's going to be in my bio, and I'll also drop it in the comments shortly. Let me see if I can find it here so I don't have too many screens open. But anyways, I'll find it later after I do this. But yeah, I'll leave you with that thought. I want you to think about what direction you want to go in 2026, what actions need to be taken, and how you need to take your organization or company to the next level. And yeah, go with that, book a precision strategy session, and let's get to work. I'm gonna get to work and try to finish prepping. I think I have two or three, no, three more proteins and two more veggies to cook. So I'm out. I'm gonna get this done. And then we'll talk soon. It's a pleasure being here. And let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Bye, y'all.